The council chamber was quiet except for the low hum of lights that flickered above the rows of young alien recruits who had gathered to listen to the stories of the old veteran named Kalor. His body was marked with scars that told a story of battles fought long ago, and his eyes carried the weight of memories that he did not wish to share but could not escape. The recruits leaned forward eagerly, still young, still unscarred, still dreaming of glory. They had heard tales of wars against humans whispered in corridors and traded like myths, and now they wanted to hear the truth from someone who had been there. Kalor sat in silence for a long time before he finally spoke, his voice low and heavy as though each word had to be pulled out of him against his will. He told them that they had asked him about fighting humans and that they thought they wanted to know. But once he told them, they would wish they had never asked. The recruits shifted, but none left, their curiosity stronger than their fear. Kalor began his story not with a battle, but with his first sight of humans. He told them that when the Empire first spoke of humans, they were dismissed as a young species, loud and unrefined, dangerous only in words but weak in truth. He remembered how the Council had mocked their small fleets and their fragile-looking bodies. No one in the Empire thought they were worth more than a passing glance. He told them how that arrogance was their first mistake. The recruits laughed nervously, not understanding why his voice had grown so dark. Kalor leaned forward and described his first deployment to a desolate border world where the Empire believed humans could never survive. The air was toxic, the storms violent, the ground itself poisoned. The Empire left them there, expecting them to perish, and Kalor and his squad were ordered to watch and wait for their end. But instead of dying, the humans adapted. They built shelters from wreckage. They learned to breathe through filters made from the very plants that grew in the poisonous soil. And they hunted beasts that terrified even the locals. They grew stronger instead of weaker. Kalor described the first time he saw them emerge from a storm, their faces covered, their eyes burning with determination, carrying their wounded but never leaving them behind. The recruits began to whisper to each other, but Kalor silenced them with a glance. He told them about a human soldier named Daniel, who had been struck down by fire and left bleeding on the ground. Kalor remembered watching, convinced the man would die, but Daniel stood again, limping forward with his weapon raised, refusing to fall. Kalor admitted that at that moment something inside him shifted. He realized that humans did not fight like other species. Pain did not weaken them. Pain seemed to make them stronger. The recruits shifted uneasily in their seats, but none looked away. Kalor told them he was young then, eager for glory, and he thought perhaps this resilience was rare, a fluke. But battle after battle he saw the same thing. Every human fought as if surrender was impossible, as if death itself had to fight to claim them. He told them of nights when he lay awake in the camp, listening to the humans singing songs in the distance while the storms howled around them. No other army did such things. No other soldiers laughed in the face of despair. The recruits frowned, some disbelieving, but Kalor only shook his head and told them that this was the beginning of his lesson. Fighting humans was not about facing their weapons or their fleets. It was about facing something far more dangerous, a will that could not be broken. He told them that on that border world he saw humans invent tools out of scraps, build fire where no fire should burn, and feed each other when there was nothing left to eat. He described the look in their eyes when they stared across the battlefield, a look that said no matter what happened, they would not stop. The recruits leaned closer now, no longer laughing, their earlier eagerness replaced by unease. Kalor's voice grew quieter as he said that if they wished to understand what it was to fight humans, they had to first understand that humans never truly fought alone. Even when separated, they fought as if every other human was standing beside them. He remembered seeing soldiers drag their wounded miles across broken ground, refusing to abandon them, even when doing so meant certain death. He remembered watching them share their last breath of filtered air, giving life to another before themselves. Kalor told the recruits that in those moments he realized the Empire had underestimated not their weapons, but their spirit. He told them the Empire commanders laughed when reports came back of human survival. They said the humans were exaggerating, spreading lies to frighten the galaxy. But Kalor had been there, and he told the recruits that there was no lie. He had seen men and women walk through storms with their heads held high. He had seen them heal wounds that should have ended them. He had seen them turn despair into strength. He told them that in time the galaxy would learn this truth, but at the beginning only a few soldiers like him knew it, and they carried the weight of that knowledge in silence. The recruits sat in silence now, Their earlier eagerness drained away, but Kaylor was not finished. He leaned back in his chair, his eyes distant, and said that what he had told them was only the beginning. The true horrors, the real lessons, would come later, but they had to first understand this. Humans were not like any other species the galaxy had known. They were born on a world that taught them to suffer and endure, and in battle that endurance became something no empire could match. Kaylor's voice dropped to a whisper as he said that the first time he faced a human in close combat, he realized he was not facing a soldier. He was facing something that refused to die, and that, he told them, was the chilling truth they wanted to hear. The recruits did not laugh now. They did not whisper. They only sat in silence, the weight of his words pressing down on them like a storm that would never end. Kaylor sat in the council chamber with the young recruits still watching him in silence, and he could feel their eyes on him as if they were trying to pull every detail out of his memory. He did not want to go further, but he knew he had to because once they asked for the truth, they could not turn away from it. He told them that after the first encounters, the Empire believed the humans would eventually break if pressed harder, and so the campaigns grew larger and the battles became more violent. Kaylor remembered the orders he received to hold a desolate planet where the storms ripped the sky apart and the ground was poisoned by years of war. The commanders thought the humans would collapse there, that no army could survive long enough in such a place to fight back. But what happened was far different. Kaylor described how the humans landed with little more than broken supplies and wreckage scavenged from earlier battles. He remembered standing on the ridge with his squad and watching them scatter across the wasteland. The storms came down in sheets of acid rain and the winds tore structures apart, but the humans built shelters with their bare hands using the wreckage of their own ships and even the bones of the great beasts that roamed the surface. They did not wait for help. They did not cry for mercy. They endured. Kaylor told the recruits that he saw humans adapt to the poisoned ground by growing food in sealed containers, built from scraps and waste. That he saw them drink from water that had been filtered through rocks and cloth when no machines were left. Every hardship that should have ended them became another reason for them to grow stronger. The recruits looked at him with doubt and awe, but Kaylor's voice did not waver. He told them of Daniel again, the human soldier who had become a ghost story among Kaylor's squad. Daniel had been wounded many times but never stopped fighting, and Kaylor remembered the day his squad trapped Daniel's unit in the ruins of a canyon. They thought it was over. They thought the humans were cornered and helpless. But Daniel and his people did not surrender. They set fires that filled the canyon with smoke. They climbed walls that no alien would dare to climb. And they struck from above and below until Kaylor's squad was scattered and broken. He admitted that he saw Daniel fighting with a broken arm, yet still moving with a fury that frightened even the bravest soldiers. Kaylor's voice lowered as he said that humans used every part of the battlefield, as if the land itself was their ally. The recruits shifted uneasily as Kaylor continued. He spoke of Laura, a human officer who commanded with calm and clear strategy. She never raised her voice, but her people followed her as if her words carried more power than weapons. Kaylor recalled watching her turn defeat into victory by guiding her soldiers to collapse a ridge over Kaylor's position, crushing tanks and scattering troops with nothing more than the terrain. He told them that humans did not see walls or traps as barriers. They saw them as tools to be turned against their enemies. The Empire began to fear officers like Laura because she made humans into more than fighters. She made them into a force that adapted faster than anyone could counter. Kaylor leaned forward and told the recruits that the most unsettling thing was not the humans' strength or their cleverness, but their spirit. He remembered nights when his soldiers celebrated what they thought was a victory, only to hear the humans singing on the wind, their voices carrying through the storms, as if to mock despair itself. He told them of Chris, a human medic who was seen running into fire to pull wounded comrades to safety, refusing to stop even when he himself was bleeding. Kaylor admitted that his squad aimed at Chris many times, but could never bring themselves to strike him down because watching him filled them with something they did not understand, something close to respect but twisted with fear. He told the recruits that the Empire commanders mocked reports of humans laughing in battle, but he had seen it with his own eyes. He had seen men and women charge into hopeless fights while smiling, as if death was nothing more than a companion they had already met. The recruits looked pale as Kaylor said that this was what made fighting humans unbearable, because every time you thought you had broken them, you realized you had only made them stronger. He remembered the day his commander said the humans were nearly defeated, but instead of surrender they pushed forward with a ferocity that crushed entire divisions. Kaylor described how soldiers around him began to whisper that humans were not mortals but something beyond, something that refused to fall. Kaylor's voice grew heavy as he told the recruits that fighting humans was like staring into a storm that never ended. Every battle drained the Empire, not just in numbers but in spirit, because the humans refused to give up. He told them that the Empire began to send larger armies, greater fleets, believing that sheer numbers would end it. But all it did was teach humans to become more dangerous. They learned from every defeat, they turned every mistake into a weapon, and they never repeated an error twice. Kaylor shook his head and told the recruits that it was then he realized the war was not about numbers or weapons. It was about endurance, and no one could endure longer than a human. The recruits sat silent now, their earlier eagerness gone, their faces pale in the dim light of the chamber. Kaylor looked at them and said that what he had told them was only a piece of the truth, because the real horror of fighting humans was not how they survived the impossible, but how they made you believe the impossible was normal. He told them that once you saw a human stand again after wounds that should have killed them, once you saw them walk out of storms that should have destroyed them, once you saw them smile when all hope was gone, you could never look at them the same way again. He told them this was the truth the Empire never wanted to admit, but every soldier who fought knew deep in their bones. The recruits shivered as Kaylor leaned back and closed his eyes, his voice trailing into silence, and the chamber felt colder as if his memories had pulled a shadow across them all. The night was calm inside the alien station that floated near the edge of human territory, and yet the air was thick with tension, because the words of the veteran alien still echoed in the minds of those who had listened to him speak about humans and their way of fighting and surviving. And when he had spoken, there had been no pride in his voice and no desire to boast as some soldiers might do when speaking of their enemies. But instead, there had been a quiet weight and a sharp chill that had made everyone realize that he was not telling a story to impress them, but to warn them. And now, as he walked alone through the corridors, his thoughts drifted back to the first time he had seen humans on the battlefield, and he remembered the strange way they moved and the strange way they fought, as if pain was a thing that could be ignored, and as if fear was a thing that could be bent to their will. And he remembered the confusion among his fellow soldiers when the humans kept advancing, even after losing many of their own. And he remembered how silence had fallen over his squad when they realized that the humans were not stopping and not running and not begging for mercy, but were instead fighting harder with every loss in another. Part of the station, a young human officer named Alex sat across from the alien veteran, trying to understand more of what he had heard earlier, because Alex had been told many things about how humans were viewed in the galaxy, but hearing it directly from a veteran who had faced humans long ago carried a weight that was different from reports and different from documents and different from the words of admirals and politicians. So Alex asked the alien to tell him what exactly had happened, and why his people feared humans in ways they did not fear others. And the alien veteran, who carried scars across his face and deep marks across his arms, leaned forward and spoke in a voice that was low and heavy with memory. And he said that the first time he had seen humans, he thought they were weak because they were smaller than many other species, and they lacked the natural weapons that so many others had, and they seemed fragile. But then the battle started, and that thought shattered. In moments, because fragile things break when hit, but the humans did not break. They endured. Alex listened carefully and did not interrupt, and the aliens spoke of the noise of human weapons and the sight of humans carrying each other out of fire, even when it meant putting themselves in danger. And he said that the humans seemed to draw strength from pain itself, and that when one of them fell, the others seemed to fight even harder, as if every loss poured fuel into their fire, instead of draining it. And Alex could see that the alien veteran was not exaggerating, because his eyes were far away, and his hands trembled slightly as he remembered the battles. And Alex asked him what made the humans different from other species that also had soldiers and also had courage, and the alien veteran answered with a chilling truth, that courage was not what drove humans, but something darker and something deeper. And he said that humans had lived for so long on a world where everything tried to kill them, and where survival was never given freely but always taken by force and effort. And because of this, they had built their entire way of living around struggle and adaptation and stubborn willpower. And so when war came to them, it was not a thing outside of their nature, but a thing that fit into it perfectly. Alex felt a shiver run down his spine as he heard this, and he realized that the alien was not just speaking of war, but of what it meant to be human in the eyes of others, and he realized that humans were seen not just as fighters, but as survivors who would not stop until the last breath was gone. And the alien told him of times when humans had been trapped in impossible positions, and yet they had fought their way out when any other species would have surrendered. And he told him of humans who had lost limbs and still kept firing, and of humans who had been burned and broken and yet refused to let go of their weapon. And Alex could not help but feel pride for his people, even as he felt a weight settle in his chest, because he understood that such pride came from a history of endless struggle and endless hardship. The alien paused for a long moment, and then he said that the most frightening thing about humans was not their weapons and not their numbers and not their ships, but their refusal to accept defeat. And he said that when humans were pressed against the wall, they became something beyond reason, because reason would tell them to stop and reason would tell them to surrender. But they ignored reason, and instead they held on with a fire that no other species could match. And he said that once you had seen that fire in human eyes, you could never forget it. And Alex asked him if he thought peace with humans was possible. And the alien veteran smiled faintly, but it was not the smile of comfort. It was the smile of a man who knew too much. And he said that peace with humans was possible, but only if you understood that peace to them was never weakness, and that if you broke it, they would come with a fury that no one could stop. As they spoke, others gathered in the room to listen, and soon a small crowd had formed because they too wanted to hear the chilling truth of what it meant to fight humans. And the alien veteran spoke of battles in space where human ships burned, yet kept pushing forward, and he spoke of ground wars where humans had fought with stones and sticks when their guns had run out, and he spoke of times when his own commanders had ordered retreats not because humans outnumbered them, but because the humans simply would not stop coming and would not stop fighting. And the crowd grew silent as they listened, and some among them shifted uncomfortably, because they had always thought of humans as strange or reckless, but they had not truly understood what it meant until now. Later that night, Alex walked alone through the station, thinking about everything he had heard, and he felt both proud and unsettled because he knew that the alien veteran was telling the truth, and he wondered how many more species in the galaxy carried this fear of humans deep inside their hearts, and he wondered if humanity even realized how others saw them. And as he thought of it, he looked out the window at the stars and whispered softly that maybe being feared was not the same as being respected, and maybe being feared was not the same as being understood. And he felt the weight of those words because he knew that the line between respect and fear was thin and fragile. The alien veteran, meanwhile, sat in silence after the others had left, and he closed his eyes and saw once more the face of a human soldier. He had fought long ago, a soldier who had been wounded and bloody and barely standing, yet who had still raised his weapon and still glared with fire in his eyes. And the veteran remembered how he had thought in that moment that the soldier would surely die, and yet the soldier did not die. He kept moving until the battle ended, and the veteran never forgot that face because it was the face of something that refused to break. And he understood even now that this was why humans were feared, not because they were invincible, but because they simply did not accept defeat, and that was something no strategy and no weapon could ever truly counter. The station lights dimmed as the long cycle of night came, and the alien veteran sat alone in the quiet room, with only the faint hum of the engines filling the silence. And his mind was not at rest, because memories refused to leave him. And they rose again like shadows reaching across time, and he remembered once more the field where humans had fought with a madness that was not madness, but a strange form of order hidden under chaos. And he thought of how many times he had seen species break under pressure when the weight of war grew too heavy. But the humans never broke and never bent, and even in their lowest moments they seemed to rise higher. And that thought had haunted him for years at the same time. Alex was restless and could not sleep, and so he returned to the place where the veteran had spoken earlier, and he found the old alien still awake and watching the stars. And Alex asked if the veteran would tell him more, because he felt there was still more to learn. And the veteran looked at him with weary eyes and said that the stories he carried were not meant to inspire but to warn. And Alex said that warnings were sometimes the most important truths. And so the veteran began to speak again, slowly and with the weight of long years in his voice. And he told Alex of a battle where his own people had trapped a group of humans inside a canyon and thought the fight was already won because the humans were surrounded and their supplies were low and their wounds were many. And yet the humans did not surrender. Instead, they set the canyon walls aflame with fuel and fire and smoke, and they charged through the blaze with a cry that shook even the strongest soldiers. And in that moment, the veteran realized that humans did not fear the fire they became. The fire. Alex listened and pictured it in his mind, the way the humans must have looked with flames around them and smoke above them. And he felt both fear and pride because he knew that his people carried within them something that words could barely describe. And he asked the veteran how his people had survived that day. And the veteran said they had not, because the humans fought with such fury that even though they were outnumbered, they tore through the lines with sheer will, and the ground itself shook with their charge, and the canyon became their victory. And from that day, the veteran said he no longer looked at humans as soldiers, but as forces of nature. And Alex fell silent because there was nothing to say. The veteran then told him another story, one that he had never spoken aloud before, because it was not about war itself, but about what came after. And he said that once his people captured a group of human prisoners and expected them to be broken and defeated, but instead the humans treated each other with kindness and even treated their guards with calm and patience. And when one human fell sick, the others gave their food to him, and when one grew weak, the others carried him. And the guards began to whisper because they had never seen such a thing, for most species in captivity turned on each other and sought to save themselves. But the humans seemed to grow stronger in unity, and even behind bars they seemed unbroken. And the veteran said that this was perhaps more terrifying than the battlefield, because it showed that humans could endure not only war, but captivity, and loss, and pain, and still remain whole. Alex could feel his chest tighten as he heard this, and he thought about the strength of unity that ran through his people. And he wondered if perhaps that was the true secret to why humans could survive anything, because they never truly stood alone. And even when they did, there was still the memory of others beside them. And he asked the veteran if that was what made humans different. And the veteran nodded slowly and said yes, because many species could fight, but few could fight for something greater than themselves. And humans always did. Whether it was for family or for friends or for a world that they called home, they never fought only for the self, they fought for the we. And that was what made them endless. As the hours passed, more crew joined them again, drawn by the quiet voice of the veteran and the truths he carried. And one asked him what he feared most about humans. And the veteran answered without pause that what he feared most was not their rage, but their hope, because hope was what drove them forward when logic said they should fall, and hope was what gave them strength when strength was gone, and hope was what turned their smallest chance into victory. And he said that he had seen humans cling to hope like a weapon sharper than any blade, and he had seen hope carry them through storms that no one else could endure. And in that moment, the crew understood that hope was not soft but dangerous in human hands. Alex looked around the room and saw the faces of the others as they listened, and he could see that their eyes held a new respect for his people, but also a quiet fear because they understood now what it meant to face humans in war. And Alex felt the weight of it heavier than before, because it meant that to others, his people were a warning, not a comfort. And he wondered if humans themselves knew how they were seen, and if it would change anything if they did. And as the veteran fell into silence again, Alex found himself whispering softly that maybe being feared was the price of being human. The veteran heard his words and gave a faint nod and said that fear was not always an enemy, because fear kept others from making mistakes. But he added that fear could also grow into hatred, and hatred into war. And so humans would always walk a line between respect and danger in the eyes of the galaxy. And Alex thought long about this as he left the room and walked once more through the station halls, and the hum of the engines followed him like the beat of a distant heart. And he knew that the words of the veteran would never leave him, and that the chilling truth about fighting humans was not just about war, but about life itself, because humans did not stop and did not surrender and did not let go, and that was both their greatest gift and their greatest curse. The long hours passed and the veteran remained quiet. But Alex returned again because something inside him would not let him rest, and he sat down across from the old alien and waited until the silence grew too heavy, and the veteran finally spoke, again, and his voice was low and rough as if he had been carrying the weight of these memories for too long. And he told Alex that there was one story he had always feared to share because it was the one that still haunted him in his dreams, and he said it happened near the end of the war when the galaxy thought it had finally cornered the humans and brought them to their knees. He told how the combined fleets had gathered more ships than the stars could count, and the humans were outnumbered, 10-1, and yet they still fought, and when their ships burned, they rammed them into enemy vessels, and when their weapons failed, they turned debris into blades and spears, and when even that was lost, they fought with their hands and their teeth. And the veteran said he had never seen such madness. But it was not madness, it was a kind of devotion that no other species could match. And he said that the galaxy learned too late that humans did not fight for victory, they fought because stopping was not in their nature. Alex listened and the images filled his mind and he almost wished the veteran would stop, but he could not look away from the truth unfolding. And the veteran said that on that day, he watched an entire human crew sacrifice themselves by flying their burning ship into the enemy flagship. And though it should have been impossible, they tore through its defenses and split it in half. And in that single act, the course of the war shifted, and the galaxy knew then that even if humans lost every battle, they would never stop fighting until their last breath. And that was when the galaxy began to fear them in a way that could never be forgotten. The veteran said that what chilled him most was not their strength, but the quiet after the battle, because when the smoke cleared and the wreckage drifted silent in space, the humans who survived did not cheer, they did not shout, they simply looked at the ruins and carried their wounded and mourned their dead. And then they prepared for the next fight without pause, and he said that in that silence he saw what made humans different. They did not celebrate destruction, they endured it and carried it and moved forward as if it were another step in a path with no, and Alex felt a coldness settle in him because he understood that to fight humans was not to fight soldiers. It was to fight a storm that never ended, and he asked the veteran why he kept telling these stories, if they brought him so much pain, and the veteran answered that truth must be spoken even if it hurt, because silence only let others repeat mistakes, and he said that the galaxy must never forget what it learned about humans, because forgetting would mean facing them again, unprepared, and he feared that one day it might happen once more. Others gathered once more to listen, drawn by the weight of the veteran's words, and someone asked if he believed humans were monsters. And the veteran shook his head and said, "No, they were not. Monsters, they were survivors, and there was a difference because monsters destroyed for the sake of destruction, but humans destroyed only because they refused to fall." And he said that was the difference that made them terrifying, because they would not stop and they would not yield, and yet they still carried compassion and loyalty within them. And that balance made them something the galaxy could never fully understand. Alex thought about that balance and realized that perhaps humans lived on the edge of fire and mercy, and it was that edge that gave them power. And he wondered if the galaxy would ever learn to see beyond the fear and into the heart of what made his people human. And as he thought of it, the veteran told another smaller story of a single soldier who carried his wounded comrade through a battlefield, even as fire rained down around him. And though both should have died, they lived because the soldier would not let go. And the veteran said that single act taught him more about humanity than 1,000 battles. The room grew still and no one moved for a long time as the story sank into them. And Alex felt something shift inside him, a deeper pride but also a heavier burden, because he saw now that the truth of humanity was not simple. It was terrible and beautiful at once, and he knew that the galaxy would never look at his people the same again. And perhaps that was the destiny of humans, to be both feared and admired, to be both a warning and a hope, and to walk a path that no other species could endure. When the veteran finally fell silent, he seemed smaller, as if the weight of years had pressed down on him again. But Alex reached out and placed a hand on his arm, and said quietly that his stories mattered because the truth always mattered, even if it was painful. And the veteran gave a faint smile for the first time and said, "Perhaps that was true." And then he closed his eyes and let the silence return. But the stories lingered in the hearts of all who had listened, and they knew they would carry them forever. The station was quiet now as the final night approached, and the veteran alien sat back and let the hum of the engines wash over him, and his thoughts returned again to the humans he had fought long ago. And he remembered the endless campaigns across planets that should have been impossible to survive, and the humans had survived them all and grown stronger with every challenge. And he thought about the lessons he had learned and how much the galaxy still did not understand about the species that refused to fall. And he knew that what he carried in memory was both a burden and a warning. Alex returned one last time before the shift changed, and he wanted to hear the final words from the veteran because he felt that the truth of humans could not be told too often. And the veteran looked at him and nodded slowly and said that the final story was the one he feared the most, because it showed everything about humans in one long moment of fire and courage. And it began on a planet where the humans had been trapped with no reinforcements, and the Empire had sent its strongest fleet knowing that victory was certain. And yet it was not because the humans did not understand the word defeat. He told of soldiers named Ryan and Mia, who had been tasked with holding a ridge while the rest of their forces evacuated wounded and supplies. And the Empire believed they would die there, and they watched from above as the humans fought against impossible odds, and they saw how the humans moved as if the ground itself obeyed them, and how they improvised with every broken weapon and every damaged shield, and how their determination seemed to give them strength beyond reason. And he said that even watching them from above made him feel powerless because no strategy seemed to work against their will. The veteran went on to describe how the humans turned the terrain into weapons by collapsing walls onto attackers and using fire and smoke to blind and disorient. And still, they advanced even when they were wounded, and even when their numbers were halved. And he said he remembered looking at Ryan dragging another soldier across the field, while Mia provided cover fire with what little energy their weapons had left. And he said it was as if the humans had learned to turn every disadvantage into an advantage, and every loss into fuel for their next attack. Alex listened and could barely imagine it, and he asked the veteran how many humans had survived that day, and the veteran said that very few survived in numbers, but the story was not about survival. It was about spirit, and how even those who fell inspired others, and how the memory of their courage became a force that moved others to act. And he said that the Empire could destroy ships and armies, but it could not destroy the human will, because it lived in each soldier and each citizen and each family, and even when the humans themselves did not know it, their determination spread like a wave that no one could stop. The veteran then spoke of the quiet after the battle when the humans who remained gathered their wounded and honored those who had fallen and rebuilt what could be saved. And he said it was terrifying to witness because it showed that humans could endure fire and loss and pain and still prepare for the next challenge without pause, and that unlike other species who would despair or collapse, humans simply moved forward because stopping was never in their nature, and that was what made them unstoppable. He told Alex that the galaxy feared humans not because of the size of their fleets or the power of their weapons, but because of the endlessness of their will, and the way they refused to break, and the way they inspired each other. And even the alien veteran admitted that he had never truly understood how to fight them, because they did not follow any logic known to the Empire, and their strategies were unpredictable and born from necessity and desperation and hope, and that made them more dangerous than any weapon. Alex felt the weight of this truth as he imagined the battlefield and the humans who had fought and fallen, and yet whose courage had lived on, and he realized that the chilling truth about fighting humans was not just about war. It was about life itself and how a species forged in hardship could become a force the galaxy had never seen. And he asked the veteran if humans feared anyone or anything, and the veteran said that perhaps they did, but fear never stopped them from acting, and it never bent their will. And he said that was why they were the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy, because they refused to yield to any odds. The veteran leaned back and looked at the stars one last time and said that telling these stories was not easy because each memory carried pain and loss, and yet it was necessary because the galaxy must know what it faced. And Alex nodded and said he understood. And he said that the humans must be proud of themselves even if they did not know what others thought of them. And the veteran smiled faintly and said, yes, because they should be proud, but they should also never forget the price of their endurance and the cost of their victories. And that was a lesson for all species who crossed paths with them. Finally, As the engines hummed and the night drew to a close, the veteran closed his eyes and allowed himself to rest for the first time in years, and Alex stood and left quietly, knowing that he carried within him the lessons and stories that the veteran had shared, and that the chilling truth about fighting humans would never leave him, and that he would carry it always as both a warning and a testament to the unyielding power of a species that refused to stop or surrender. And that was the final lesson the veteran gave, because humans were unstoppable, not just in battle but in spirit, and that was the greatest truth of all.